Welcome to Adventist Voices, Spectrum's podcast. I'm Alexander Carpenter. I'm here with Kyle Portbury talking about his film, The Hopeful, which is releasing in April, and also talking about his creative biography in and around the Adventist Church. So let's get right into it, Kyle. You have an Emmy. Congratulations.
I did. Can you just wander around, like, just generally on the street with me now?
Of course,
and introduce me to people
yes,
like that?
I'll
I feel like it needs that kind of gravitas to it as
Yes.
you wander around places.
Kyle, Emmy, Portbury,
Yeah.
Australian,
Is that fabulous? I think,
in that order.
yes, in that order, yeah. Less auspiciously, I was the under-18 boys age champion in high school in athletics.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
What did
in
you...
my final year.
Was it
I won that at the end. I was always really good
discus, or what was your...
No, I was like, I mean, as odd as this is going to sound, it's actually
weightlifting.
quite
I saw the
fast.
guns.
Yes, that's right. I was in the weightlifting in the gym every day in high school. Yeah, and it's wasted away.
Yeah,
It's
no.
terrible.
No.
But
Folks,
if you
get
don't-
back on that physique.
what
Forget
do they
about
say?
the arts.
Yeah, if you don't use it, you lose it. So
Yeah.
clearly that's happened. But I was really good at running.
Okay.
I was
Yeah.
very fast
Yeah,
over
nice.
the 100 and the 200, but never any good at any of the other athletics.
Yeah. Sure. No
pursuits.
decathlon.
No
for you.
decathlon for me. So in my final year, I worked out that if I just did everything, that I had actually a crack at from a points table wise. The way that they
Okay.
did
Oh, you
points.
gamed the system. I get it. Okay.
Well, I actually got a little bit of help too, because somebody
Okay.
said, "Hey, if you do all this," and then it got down to the last. I think I just had to clear the first bar in high jump
Okay.
to get age champion,
Okay.
and I only just did that.
Okay.
That was like because I'm quite short. I think I had 3. It was my third attempt, and I didn't knock it over. So
Congrats.
I'd knocked it twice already, and this,
Yeah.
mind you, this is the lowest.
This is dramatic
This is
storytelling
the
here.
lowest bar.
First one,
First
fail.
one,
Second
fail.
one,
Second
fail.
one,
Will
fail.
Kyle, was this your first
I saw.
major award?
Well, in athletics.
Yeah,
It was my
okay.
first and only.
Okay.
So I literally was graduating from
Yeah.
high school after this. So I'm like,
Okay.
I'm gonna have lots of blue ribbons for running, but
Yeah.
never the trophy on the mantelpiece.
So you
That
got the
trophy
trophy
now, I don't even know where that is.
Yeah. It's
You know,
crazy how that stuff
Such a
is
huge
so
part of your life
meaningful.
for a
and-
hot minute.
Yeah.
Now just irrelevant.
Yeah. Well, talk about your Emmy.
film,
yeah. So let's start with Sojourner Truth, which is an example of you kind of reaching outside of the kind of Adventist story canon and telling a story that
Not that far out though.
exactly. Yep.
She was known.
Yeah.
Known in the world.
Yeah, she's a very interesting figure because she really, let's just say she played around with a lot of different movements.
Yeah.
Whatever was helping her kind of achieve her abolitionist goals.
Yeah.
Amazing woman, but you know
she's
more than
she's
that I do about her. So tell us a little bit about who she is and how you how you told her story.
Yeah, well, as you said, she's an abolitionist in the mid 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
So
Underground Railroad.
Underground Railroad. Happened to live and knew in the same town, Battle Creek.
Mm-hmm. Buried in Battle Creek, right?
Battle Creek.
Yeah.
And knew the Whites and knew the Bates really well.
Mm-hmm.
There was an underground railway station right near there for a time as well.
Mm-hmm.
So she was in that community and known to it. And so she came up in the research when we were originally doing the research for the 6-part miniseries.
Name of the miniseries?
Tell the World.
There we go. Great.
So you can see her influence at certain junctures in this historical milieu, if that's even a word.
Yes, it is.
I think it's a word,
Yeah.
isn't it? Yeah.
Usually pronounced with a French accent.
Milieu.
Milieu. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Not to be confused with Georges Méliès.
That's right.
And his wonderful Man to the Moon with the rocket goes.
Amazing. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So much of that got burned and lost, so it's
Yes.
amazing we even have any of it. But anyway, we digress on the history of cinema. So she was known, she was in that world, but there was never really any context that made sense for her to be in Tell the World.
Yeah.
But I had all of this interesting information about her that I'd gathered in the research for that. And then an opportunity came up, 2018. I got some grant funding, and I thought, I'll do like a period drama short piece on just the famous speech that she does, Ain't I a Woman?
Mm-hmm.
And I had a look at it, and that speech has been done before. It's not new that people have, either done spoken word on it or have done short pieces on film for it. But in looking at that, what I realised is nobody had ever contextualised why she felt compelled to get up and deliver that speech in the first place. And so I had a look at so it's a women's convention in Akron, Ohio in 1851.
Oh, those
she
were,
attends,
at
which no women are allowed to speak.
Yeah.
Which tickled my fancy highly in the first place, because I was like, okay, so it's a women's convention talking about women and their place in society, and they're unable to speak at it.
Yeah.
And there were a series of gentlemen who spoke in platitudes.
Yeah.
Proceeding all afternoon, basically.
Yeah, mansplaining, early mansplaining.
Early mansplaining. And they were spectacular at it.
Yeah.
Spectacular mansplaining. So when you contextualize that, and you're her, and she's already quite, even at this point, she's quite a vocal, doesn't mind standing up and saying her mind, giving you a piece of it.
Yeah.
Which I always appreciate. I always love people who have got,
She was a tough lady.
Oh,
I was listening to a little bit of the history of the Underground Railroad a few weeks ago. She was, if there was a crying baby and they're, running through the night, she was not afraid to knock the baby out to keep it quiet.
Yes. I mean, this is a woman who's very clear on the goal, right?
Yeah. Get to Canada
and to safety by any means possible.
Yeah.
So I kind of love her as a person. She's a bit like House. You remember the TV show?
Oh,
House?
yeah, sure, yeah.
So you probably wouldn't want to hang out with House.
No.
Because you'd be intimidated by him,
or annoyed,
or something. And she strikes me as one of those characters where you're not sure you would want to operate in her space with her.
Sure.
And I don't think that's in a bad way. As a character, when you look at her, I am inspired by her because I go, wow, I mean, like the beatdown she took, literally and figuratively, for standing up and saying what she said.
Yeah.
And history's fascinating like this. There are two different, very, very different accounts of that speech. So there was one by a male journalist that was done at the time, like literally on the day. He wrote, "This is what she said."
Yeah.
And it's very matter of fact, and it doesn't have any of that cadence and beautiful oratory that you see in the Ain't I a Woman?
Mm-hmm.
Look at my arm kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Like none of that's in the original version of it. And a lady called Mrs. Gage, I believe her name was. History may correct me, but I think it was Gage. She did her recount 12 years later, and that's that's the version that we know and love today.
Gotcha.
So I think it was fascinating to contextualize that differently than it had been before, and it allowed you to get a little bit of an insight into what provoked her to get up and actually lay the smack down.
Yeah.
And then she literally does a mic drop, even though there's no microphone in this day and age. She literally did the mic drop, said her piece, and walked off stage and out the back of the church.
Nice.
And was gone.
That's cool.
After sitting, literally, she moved from somewhere in the audience.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time it got to her standing up, she was literally perched on the edge of the stage, apparently, because she was so agitated by what she was hearing. And I love the idea of that, like someone who's so moved to act.
Yeah.
It's just really, I just think people like that fascinate me, And again, it goes to that whole thing about how we perceive we're being perceived, and does that get in the way of the thing that we feel compelled to share?
Yeah.
And
it's
some
a big
people,
question. Yeah.
Some people have just got the ability to set how they're going to be perceived aside.
Yeah.
They don't filter. They just go, no, this.
Yeah.
Regardless of consequence.
This truth is so important.
Yeah.
You just have to do it. Who cares what people think?
So it makes sense that, she would be friends with Bates and Ellen White. I mean, they're kind of similar
Very
characters.
driven people, willing to give up everything.
100%.
How did you structure that film? Sojourner Truth?
So it was in two parts. So
Okay.
first of all, you kind of set up what's going on, the environment, and then you see the three different ministers who are getting up and mansplaining.
Yeah.
And you slowly but surely, and it's animated. We did graphic novel style on it, and so slowly but surely you start seeing her move. She starts quite distant from that conversation, and then by the time she gets up, she's a huge presence in frame. So it's
Nice.
it's like it's that. I guess it's charting the course of minimization to having a major impact.
Sure.
Yeah. And you've only got like 5 minutes, right? Like it was part of a series on Kera TV, which is one of the PBS stations in Texas. So you've got a short slot to tell this story. So you've got to be quite economical and get to the point. Like what is the heart of this? And if somebody had to turn the sound down, would they be able to understand just from the visual what was going on as well?
Nice.
So you're really doing that visual literacy for people where they're able to very quickly go, oh, I see what's going on here. There's mansplaining, and you're not even needing to hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you did this in Texas, and we're telling the
Voiced
Kyle.
by students, by the way.
Oh,
Yeah.
from Southwestern.
From Southwestern Adventist
Nice.
University, yeah.
So this is perfect because my own strategy here is to start you in medias res.
Yes.
How did you end up in Texas
Oh, fabulous.
teaching at Southwestern Adventist University?
Yeah, so I had been the creative director of film and television at the Adventist Media Centre in Australia for about 6 years prior to that.
Yep.
And I'd had opportunities there that you can only dream of. Like I got to do a series called Beyond the Search, 14-part, 3 presenters. I think we shot in 14 countries over 10 months.
Amazing.
On the road. Humped 400 kilos of kit all over the planet and destroyed a couple of cameras. All that good stuff. So it was fabulous. Some of the adventures on there were.
What was the focus of that show for folks who haven't seen it?
Yeah, so it's looking at big issues through the lens of the worldview of Adventism.
Yeah.
Right. So let's take death.
Mm-hmm.
What is death in the context of human, experience, and then
The end.
And then what's the world view within the faith context of Adventism to that? So,
Yeah, great.
but we looked at it very cinema verite,
Mm-hmm.
which again, like when I came in, I'd just come out of working in London and Europe, so that cinema verite kind of culture had been well ingrained. Like I'd started off in front of camera as an actor, training at Drama Centre, and then had gotten an opportunity to go behind camera and had some fabulous training experiences with a couple of really big old school UK directors. One particularly, Bob Blagden, who did All Creatures Great and Small.
Oh, yeah.
Became a big mentor and still is. I'll still ring him up from time to time and ask him advice on stuff. He also was he was one of the graphic designers on Monty Python's Flying Circus.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, all that opening sequence that you see,
Amazing.
and
Yeah.
all that was cut
That
out by
animation is
hand.
so cool.
And like old school graphic design. And so the foot was his. He also did a Clockwork Orange poster, Stanley Kubrick.
That's amazing.
So you'd walk into his house,
Wow.
and you're literally above the landing in the entryway of the house is this fabulously giant Clockwork Orange poster with "Dear Bob, thank you for all your art and talent," or something to that effect.
Wow.
Love, Stanley. And you're
That's
just
cool. Wow.
like this, you're basically getting to walk into cinema, art, and culture in that area, on a daily basis, just because you were.
Well, let's actually
conservatorium training, as it were.
let's jump. How did you get from Australia to London?
Ooh, yeah.
Kind of what was that story?
So we decided. So I'm part British. So Mum's British.
Okay.
And I got married to my beautiful wife Andrea, and straight after that we were like, let's go on an adventure. So we're both teachers. Teaching at this time is really easy to get and live in London.
Yeah.
For
I feel like all around the world there's Australians who are just
literally
chilling.
just
have taking a
passport,
break.
we'll travel. That's kind of that deal. Especially in your early 20s.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the rite of
It
passage.
is,
So
yeah.
because I had a passport, it made it really easy to do that transition. So we get over there, I start teaching and I'm a history English teacher.
Mm-hmm.
We start teaching 3 months in, I realised I'm not exactly built for the kind of crowd control work required in inner city London comprehensives.
Oh, yeah,
So I
sure.
started looking at ways that I could get around that,
Yeah.
having to go into classrooms. So then I was a teaching recruiter for a little while,
Okay.
for another couple of months, sending other people into places I would no longer go myself. It's like, you're going to love this place. This school's fabulous.
Nice.
Yeah. And then I'd done a little bit of amateur like acting and stuff in Australia and New Zealand. And I kind of went, oh, maybe a really great way to get out of this is to study right? And then I can we can stay here and I can study and do this. And my wife was on to me. She's a very clever woman. And she said, if you can just get into it and it's just pay money and no, like I'd rather buy a moped. Thanks with that. But if you go to a conservatorium where you've actually got to audition, they can tell you whether you're any good or not.
Yeah.
If you're rubbish, then you can just get back to like the
Nice.
business at hand
Yeah.
and get out there and like earn a honest living, fella. So, we did that, and unfortunately for her, she never got a moped because I got through, I think it was like 3 different audition processes. And then all of a sudden you're in acting conservatorium and you're part of a company
Yeah.
model that they did at Drama Centre
Amazing.
there. And and then you're exposed to this weird and wonderful world of plumbing your own interior world for storytelling purposes, right?
Yeah.
Like in a way that no one I knew had gone and become an actor,
Yeah.
had even gone into entertainment. So it's very new and very different. And the exploration within that just, fabulous. Like working out how to physically tell stories.
Sure. Yeah.
And how gestures communicate.
Did you feel like you took to learning that language?
100%.
Like, yeah.
Like it felt like it was very much a natural, like, wow, okay, so this feels right.
Yeah.
Like this is a world I think I should have always been
Sure.
not accidentally trying to exist in, but actually purposefully doing it.
Yeah.
And so that was fabulous training ground for that. And then I guess because I'd been doing stuff in the UK and in Europe, I got an opportunity to go to the church in Australia. We're looking for somebody, particularly for that Beyond series. So it was like the creative direction of that.
Yeah.
So it was great. Like we did a lot of playing around with how I think it was originally supposed to be only one presenter. And I kind of came in, and with the producer on that, a guy called Jared Madden, we were like, what if it was 3 people? Because you can dislike one person, but you can't not like one of 3 people, right? So at any given time in an episode...
The Trinity.
Right? There'll be someone in that mix
Yeah.
who you're going to gel with.
Yeah.
Like it may not be the main guy, but it might be one of the other presenters that you quite like, or it might be Danielle instead of Johnny, or Jeff might be more,
Yeah.
And then we just played with how you could integrate storylines so that you could get to a much more visual way of asking the question of, well, so if death or pain is like this and we look at it like this, what do you think? So it was a fun like exercise in trying to work out how you could craft 3 presenters with 3 different storylines and tie them all together into a what do you think moment at the end.
Yeah.
And we had outside consultants come in and we'd pitch. There was this ad exec who came in from like one of the big ad agencies in Sydney, and Jared and I would pitch to him concepts. And it was fabulous because he didn't know anything about our worldview at all.
Yeah.
And so you would often, and I think this is where I learned the value of not working on stories about faith with people of the same faith, because they've all got the same way of looking at the world.
Sure. Yeah.
And so that provocation that I really need and the challenging that I need as an artist really comes from people that question, okay, why are you saying that, or why are you taking that for granted?
Sure.
That guy, Gary Murphy, I remember we were pitching him the take on what is hell from an Adventist context. And we're, Jared and I are just going, blah, 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 and Adventists don't believe that there's a literal hell and blah, 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 blah. And he's like, whoa, stop. What? Just backtrack on that for a minute. what do you mean you don't believe in a literal hell? And so that's what then became the basis for that episode, because he's like, well, that's interesting to me.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
sure.
everybody's heard about the traditional view of what hell and purgatory are and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But you guys have got a unique take on the fact that that's not part of that, which goes back to that unique take that we have on the character of Christ, right? Like hope and healer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that locks very much into that central focus view. So it would make sense that having that understanding coming out of the great disappointment, that becomes a formation of all the other stuff around it. It would make sense that they looked at hell and went, well, this doesn't add up. You know?
Yeah.
And so it's fascinating when you get challenged by other people and provoked in why are you just brushing over something that actually is really important. Like, this is a really great topic to talk about and challenge and ask the question. Like, well, what if it isn't? What if it is?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah.
You know? How does that line up with your view of the character of God? You know? So I liked that series a lot because you got to play around with location and space and time.
Yeah.
And different personality of presenter in order to tell those stories and provoke people with them, yeah.
You know, the history of Adventism in media is very interesting to me personally, just because one of the reasons that Adventism kind of was able over time to grow in those first couple of decades was their commitment to print media, which was decentralized. You know, you didn't have to be Gutenberg. You could
you could
put some money together and suddenly you were, signs of the times.
Yeah.
That then gets, the famous HMS Richards. He's taking, here we are in Los Angeles, where he was one of the first people to do radio.
Yeah.
Period. Not just the first Adventist.
But the first person in, wasn't it? I think he met, was it Del Delca?
That was later on. I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, who was like singing cabaret or something. He got her to come in. I think that was the story anyway.
Okay.
Like I'd have to go and look.
Yeah.
But I remember reading. I think she was cabaret singing somewhere, and he got her to come and do some music in one of those programs. I think, or maybe it was George Vanderman. I can't remember. You'd have to look it up.
Okay.
So don't quote me on the historical accuracy of that. But I do know that was roughly the story of how she became a Christian and then.
Well, he was very willing when, the later on generation, the music kind of style changed. He was very adaptable to bringing in guitars, for instance.
I mean, we've got a really rich history going back. Even to there was an evangelist apparently right here in Hollywood that had a couple of friends in that early era, 1910s, 1920s. And he actually, so legend has it, got one of the props guys to build him some beasts of Revelation that would fire out on on steam jets.
Okay.
Out onto the stage with him. So that and he had like controls and stuff there. So at the appropriate moment, he'd be like, "And the little horn."
Nice.
And this he'd come out and smoke would billow out with it and stuff. So, that kind of showmanship, I guess, like the entertainment side of it, has always been something Adventists have kind of...
There's a little innovation. Innovation.
There's like a spirit of innovation of like looking at new technologies as ways to support that message, I guess. Like get it to a wider audience, if you will,
Well, let's actually jump on that theme of innovation. I feel like there's a lot of anticipation by folks in the creative spaces in Adventism who are some are frustrated, some are quiet.
Yeah.
But there's a sense right now that there's just not enough space for creativity and innovation. There's a creatives conference that's happening up in Portland this month, and Spectrum sending one of our team members, our social media manager, up there, and they're kind of just doing this on their own in a way because there's just not enough denominational support for creative people who are absolutely willing to use their talents for a greater mission. You've been doing this for a while now. I'm not calling you old, but you definitely
Look,
know your
I've
way
looked at it,
around,
Yeah.
a denominational meeting or two.
I have been around, Alex, as they would say.
Yeah, you've got the battle scars and the wins. So tell
Yeah.
me what's the state of creativity in Adventism?
I think we're at a tipping point
Okay.
right now, right? There has always been a tension culturally in Adventism that art is viewed as an illustrative support
Great.
to a minister.
Yeah.
So it doesn't stand on its own from a validity point of view
Yeah.
unless it's being used by somebody
Sure.
to preach.
It's got to have a kind of PR
Got to
purpose.
it's got to have someone that needs to explain to you how to think or feel or do as a response to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a criticism of church or organization, right? Like that's just the reality of proselytizing is the business of church.
Mm-hmm.
But art is the business of church members. And this is where the tension has always laid.
What do you mean by that?
So I think what I came to a reconciliation in my own mind on, right? Like, so I got very frustrated at the end of 2015 as an artist working for the church.
And why?
Well, because I guess there's a feeling that your art isn't valued.
Gotcha.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like, actually, well, we've got an outcome that we need from this, and your art comes secondary to that.
Sure.
And I really struggle with that because you feel like, my art is my ministry. It's my expression of how I view the world from a faith perspective.
Sure.
Which isn't to say you're always making faith stuff. It just means that that's an underpinning of the way you see the world. Like that worldview flavors everything in the way you look at it. Like you'd be hard pressed for it not to.
Yeah.
So I think that when that is minimized for the sake of somebody else's opinion of how art should be viewed or consumed or whatever, it's really hard to reconcile that because it's really easy, I think, to get into a mindset of as an Adventist or doesn't really matter, any Christian creative, that the church should be patronizing my art, right? Like, because otherwise, how am I going to make it? If I don't take money from there, well, where am I going to get the money to go and make that art? So the reconciliation that I went through, Alex, which is going to frustrate some people, and that's great, right? Like
Sure.
It should provoke.
We like tension.
Yeah. The tension point where I was able to break that frustration was in realizing that actually, if I want to be an artist, that's kind of on me, right?
Yeah.
My ability to tell stories the way I see them is actually on me. So if I want to do that, if I feel compelled to tell that story, then I shouldn't let that be hamstrung by feeling that somebody else should support that.
Yeah.
Right? Like if I'm passionate enough about it and I've got enough perseverance and I feel the burden for it, then actually it's okay to go, right, well, I'm going to push towards that story that I feel is really personal and relevant and doesn't need explanation, right? Actually can sit for 90 minutes on a cinema screen and doesn't need me to tell you, the audience, how you should think, feel, or do. And I think that's where the tension point comes, right? Like there's a tendency from a bigger, wider church perspective, from that corporate side of a church. And it doesn't matter what the denomination is, but there's a tendency to be afraid of something if you can't control how someone's going to take it.
Yeah, sure.
So what if we put out this painting, let's say, and somebody stands in front of it and doesn't think exactly what we need them to think as a result of viewing it?
Yeah.
Well, what do we do with that?
Failure.
Is that a failure?
Burn the painting.
Well, but how do we quantify whether it was worth doing the painting?
Yeah. Yeah. It's very instrumental. Art. It's it's controlled and there's a lot of fear involved.
Yeah. But again, that's our fault for culturally allowing that to creep in over the years,
Yeah.
right? Like we've allowed that as church members. Like you got to remember, like our church is based on a grassroots bottom up,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
and I think the more we have,
I thought the leaders were ordained
well, you know, like that's
by God.
I'm not theologically skilled enough to
Okay.
comment too highly on that, Alex. But what I would say is that I think what we've done as church members
Yeah.
is we've abdicated our responsibility in church.
Yeah.
And we've gone, well, we can't do anything, so therefore we're not going to do anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and I think the revelations to me over the last 2 years is that, and it's not that I'm doing it without church.
Yeah. Of
Right?
course. Yeah.
It's that this might actually be the first time that we've done something where church has partnered with the artist
Well,
and given the artist the ability to do the art without restriction.
yeah. Yeah.
Right?
That's great.
So to have gone from having an experience in the church where I was frustrated and couldn't reconcile or I couldn't do the compromises required, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the challenge.
Yeah.
To then have an experience with, so the executive producers that I worked with at Hope Studios,
Yeah.
which is Hope Channel's new
Yeah.
cinematic arm,
Yeah.
you know, to go from a frustrating, not great experience
Yeah.
to having one of the most positive and great professional experiences with your executive producers,
Yeah.
inside or outside of a church organization.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm talking with studios that I've worked with before. So the 3 EPs on this film
Mm-hmm.
had an attitude of, well, this is how we feel in this moment, which isn't to say that you have to do anything with that at all, Kyle. Like, we're not artists, you're the artist.
Uh-huh.
So we're just telling you, like, you asked how
Yeah.
we felt in that sequence. This is how we felt. You do that,
Yeah.
what you will. And so as a result of that, because they gave you the trust to just, we're just going to give you information, it's up to you what you do with it, you then went, well, now I trust you. So therefore, I'm likely to go back to the edit suite with my editor now, and I'm going to look at that.
Sure.
But instead of looking at it and actioning a whole bunch of notes from you,
Yeah.
I'm looking at it, I'm thinking about the way you said to me that you responded to it. And then my editor and I are going, actually, we're not getting enough out of this moment.
Yeah.
We can get more out of this,
Sure,
right? Like,
yeah.
I don't want an audience to just have that. I want them to have that.
Yeah.
Or I want them to have that.
Sure.
Because the worst thing you can possibly have is just, meh,
Yeah.
it's fine.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, I'd rather somebody absolutely passionately hated or absolutely passionately loved.
Yeah.
You know, because at least you've provoked them on one end of that spectrum.
Yeah.
You know, if you just elicit a meh.
So you're having fun these days with
Yeah,
hope.
so much fun.
You're having fun
Yeah.
with the hopeful.
Which is hilarious for me even to be sitting here and saying that.
Yeah,
right? And I
sure.
think that would be my message to Adventist creatives. It's like, it's almost that classic thing of like, ask not what your church can do for you, but what you can do for your church.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the time that is up to us as individual members to just remember that we're a messenger of a very clear character of Christ,
Yeah.
right? It's hope and healing. That's really all it is. If you have a look at everything flows out of that. Our message is not be Adventist.
Yeah.
Controversial, I know, right?
Yeah.
But that's our message. It's
Sure.
like, what is this unique take on the character of Christ that we feel came out of that great disappointment, right? Like, that's what we reconciled. And in the end of the day, that's to me the great epiphany of the last couple of years, is you realize that's actually the gig, you know, is to be a purveyor in your sphere of influence, as small or big as it is, of that hope and healing.
Yeah.
You know, and it might be as simple as somebody going, man, alive, like, I actually really like the concept of 24 hours of rest. Like, I work 7 days a week, basically. I'm always on my phone. I don't get a moment off. And you've just described to me an ability to shed responsibility for 24 hours. Like, can you tell me a bit more about that? Because I don't know how to do that, you know?
Yeah.
And we take that sometimes for granted, particularly if you've been an Adventist your entire life like I have. Like,
Yeah.
I just take for granted that it's sundown Friday because when I was a kid, you're told, down tools.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
The Hopeful's coming out in April on Fathom Events.
Yes.
Folks can get tickets. Tell me what you're kind of working on in the future. Do you see more projects with the denomination, or where are you kind of looking at down the road?
I like stories about interesting characters, right? Like, say, somebody that I'm going to go, wow, there's something about the way that they navigated that moment in life, or those several moments in their life. That interests me.
Yeah.
Or I've got this like big issue, like there's a great featurette that Alfonso Cuarón did on gravity.
Yeah.
With Sandra Bullock and
Yeah.
George Clooney. And I think he got asked the question, like, why did you want to tell this story? And he said, I wanted to tell a story about adversity.
Yeah.
Because everyone has adversity in their life. And I just remember thinking, wow, that's so simple and so clear, you know? And that's kind of like I've ruminated on that many times since that featurette. And I always try and work out, well, what am I trying to tell a story about, you know? With The Hopeful, it started out as I wanted to tell a story about anticipation because we all anticipate something.
Yeah.
And it became I wanted to tell a story about perseverance.
Yeah.
Because we all persevere through something. You know, and that's a very human. It's not. You don't have to be of faith or any faith for that to resonate with you.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, maybe I tell stories about people that existed, true stories. Maybe I find a way to tell a story about one of those big issues that's more of a narrative fiction work. I'm working on one that's a bit of a mashup of that at the moment.
Okay.
Louis Armstrong when he was 10. So it's almost, and I think I made this genre up, Alex. I'm not sure it exists, but it's like a musical historical fairy tale.
Oh.
So it has very grounded elements of historical accuracy, but I've allowed that story to breathe with a little bit more wiggle room.
Sure.
So it doesn't need to be slaved.
There's no footnotes in there.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be slaved to historical accuracy because it's what's the central, what are you wanting people to feel when they go in?
Great.
You know, how do you want to change the way that they're looking at that aspect of curiosity, for instance, you know? Curiosity is a really fun one to tell stories about.
Yeah. Well, it's been good chatting with you about kind of how you think about the arts in Adventism, and
hopefully a little bit controversial.
Yeah.
Because we all like a little bit of controversy.
Yes.
I look forward to the letters to the editor.
I'll forward them to you.
You forward them on. I'll put them in that appropriate spot in my desk.
Yeah, that's right. I've got one of those too.
Nice.
All right. Well, take care. Thanks a lot.
Hey, thanks, Alex. Thanks for having me.